Well, I never knew I had Martians in my garden, and I never knew there were aliens on my roof. I got shadow people, and they're living in my basement. Got a funny feeling Bigfoot's gonna be here soon. I was so blind before, I was so unaware, but now I swear I'm seeing Sasquatch over there.
Welcome back. Welcome to another episode of Tales and Mysteries of the Mojave Patrol. We're going to start with a slice of life, human interest. And it's going to have a spooky ending. You'll see. Give me a second. Got so many pockets in this thing, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. Whoa. And this is for the little doodle. Are you happy? I'm up here in the mountains just above Azusa. It's called Highway 39 or Azusa Canyon Road. Really popular place for bicyclists and motorcyclists and people with hot cars, Mazdas and BRZs and you name it. They're up and down here all the time. But it's the middle of the week, and so it's a little bit slower up here. And the reason I'm up here is because a friend of mine named Wally, this is one of his favorite places to go, and this is who we're going to talk about. My old buddy Wally. One of my oldest friends, and one of my dearest friends. And if I sort of speak of him in the past tense, that's because my dear friend Wally has passed, and he's been passed for a couple of years now. But that doesn't mean I don't have some great stories about him. So let's get going. Oh. We used to come up here a lot, especially in our younger days. There was a group of us who used to hang out together. We called ourselves the Mugs. It was an acronym for Misunderstood Good Guys. We were pretty good guys. We did a lot of crazy stuff, but I'd like to think it was stuff that wouldn't get us arrested. But we never did. First off, there was me. Got a buddy of mine named Dave. He was one of the strangest ones. Then there was Brad and Dawn, and last but not least, Wally. There were a couple other people who used to hang out with us. A guy named Mike, a guy named Dan. mine named Mark, another guy named Stuart. But the core of the group, who were all together all the time, were me, Dave, Wally, Don, and Brad. This is another place Wally and I and the group used to like to hang out. It's called Shoemaker Road. At one time, this was a proposed escape route for the people of Los Angeles if there was to be an atomic war. About 2 or 3 miles up ahead are 2 enormous tunnels that cut through the mountains that was supposed to provide the escape route here. But with the advent of intercontinental ballistic missiles, they felt that there wouldn't be enough time to do it, to evacuate people. Before that, the Russians, and even the United States, were supposed to deliver their nuclear weapons with bombers, the B-52, and the Russians would use the Bear bomber, and deliver their nuclear weapons to Los Angeles and San Francisco and San Diego, you know, major naval bases. And there were Nike missile bases that had the Nike Ajax anti-aircraft missile that was they had atomic missiles, and not many bombers would have survived that type of strike. And the bombers that did survive were supposed to be picked off by F-104 starfighters. The F-104 starfighter for the 1960s was pretty fast. As a matter of fact, I think it was 100 knots per hour faster than the F-35. Don't quote me on that. But it had limited range and maneuverability. Basically, it was just to strike bombers. And now I'm going to show you the rest area that they built. Rest area and camp picnic area that was built. When this was abandoned, they were going to just make it a little day camp picnic area place. Now, on the way back when in the 60s, when I was a kid, there were picnic tables and trash cans. And this is a really nice place. You can bring the family up for a picnic in the summer. Yeah, up in the mountains where it's cooler. But with the advent of the I don't give a rat's ass about other people's property mentality, the picnic tables got busted up and trashed. There was graffiti on everything. Trash cans were tipped over and ransacked. And eventually they just stopped taking care of it. I mean, after all, if we're not going to take care of this stuff, why should they? Why spend money on something that's just going to be continuously replaced? So they stopped taking care of it. And here's what you see. Which is kind of a shame. Okay, this is Glendora Mountain Road. Another place we used to hang out. Now I'm going to take you to another one of our favorite spots to hang out where we were in our youth. And Wally and I. We call this place Tailgate Ridge. Just on the other side of that hill there is a slope. It's not that steep, but pretty steep. It's climbable. But Mark's cousins came out to visit him, and Wally and I and Mark's cousins, we all came up here. And Mark's cousins decided they were going to climb over this hill here and go down that ridge. Well, they did. And in about a half hour or so, they all came back up, and they told us there were a bunch of truck tailgates on the other side of that ridge, like 6 or 8 of them, just the tailgates from pickup trucks. So we called it Tailgate Ridge. But anyhow, that's pretty much it. So later, I'll cut in the strange tale about Wally. And it's pretty strange. Later. There you are. And thanks for joining me. This is the later in the day second half of the tale of Wally. As you've probably seen up to now, and I haven't edited it together yet, so I'm speaking off the cuff. Wally was a prankster. He enjoyed having a good time. He liked to smoke, liked to drink, and I loved him dearly. I still love him. He was one of the best friends I ever had. As a matter of fact, I remember one New Year's Eve, my daughter was at a party in Burbank, and she was stranded. And Wally and I and our families were at Riverside, and he drove all the way to Burbank, picked up my daughter, and brought her home to Azusa. That's a friend, and a fast friend. So, years went by. Wally and I had a lot of fun together. We did a lot of things. But his health started to fail him, unfortunately. But we still managed to get out, do things. It didn't matter how bad he was feeling. If we were going camping, if we were doing something, he was there with us. And unfortunately, as all things, he passed. And that was a sad occasion. I got a phone call. I was sound asleep. His family called me. They were beside themselves. My wife and I got in our car, drove to Wally's house, and the paramedics had just left, and he had apparently died of a stroke. I was very fortunate to say my last goodbyes right then and there. Hang on a second. This is in honor of old Wally. Oop. You can do it. Might as well get this out of the way. See, back in World War I, cigar cutting tools had to have a lot of purposes. A cigar cutter, a bottle opener, a corkscrew, and a wire trimmer. All the soldier needed. Yes, there's ice in the glass. There's a long, mildly interesting story about beer and ice and why I do it. Wally liked his beer. Wally liked a good cigar. This is for you, Doodle. So Wally passed away, and he had always expressed a desire to have his ashes interred at a place we called the bunker. Now, the bunker is a place we camp in the desert. I'll put a picture up. And in front of this place is a lone salt cedar tree. That in itself is a story. Well, when Wally's stepdad, Bob, passed away, he took his mother to the bunker with Bob's ashes with the intent of scattering them. And Wally's mother, who had never been there before, stepped out of the car, looked around, and said to Wally, "Bob would have loved it here." So Wally broke out his entrenching tool, dug a hole under the salt cedar, and interred Bob's ashes there. And every so often when we go to the bunker, Wally would pour a beer next to Bob as an homage. Then a few years down the road, we had another good friend, and his name was Benny, and he passed away. Oh, I have a fire going in the fireplace. It's a little chilly, so that'll just knock the chill off the air. His wife, Sarah, asked us if we would inter Benny at the bunker because Benny used to go with us and he really liked going. And she felt that since we'd be there a lot, he should be with us. So, Wally broke out an entrenching tool, dug a hole next to Bob, and put Benny next to him and covered it over. And it's not like anybody's going to find this because after the first rain, you'd never know anybody dug there. We did our best to camouflage it. They're still there. You know what? That'll be a whole story in itself, the bunker. Because all kinds of crazy crap happen and stuff you're not going to believe. So when I tell this to you, don't get me in trouble, all right? So we had a big trip planned. And we had to cancel it because Wally passed and there was a lot of things going on. But when the time came, Wally's wife and the rest of his family and all of our friends, we had about 30 people, we were all going to go to the bunker and inter Wally's ashes right next to Bob and Benny. Beer, the gift that keeps on giving. Well, it was a hell of a thing. Everybody showed up, we partied, we ate, and then the time came. I dug the hole for Wally. Decades ago, Wally had stolen a stone from a cemetery. I'm not saying which one, a cornerstone from a burial area. Took it back to his house, and with a hammer and chisel, in the flat top of the rock, he carved a big M. The stone had been carved to look sort of like the top of a, wasn't really a pyramid shape, it was square with flutes carved into the side of it, and the top was sort of a semi-dome that meant an apex like a pyramid, but it wasn't really a pyramid. So Wally took a chisel and a hammer and he carved an M in it for mug. And then to make it extra spooky, he put airplane glue in the M and lit it on fire so it left a black burn mark there. And he kept it at his house. One of the things we used to do together was we used to drive up into Azusa Canyon, which you saw earlier today, and I had
I had a Wagoneer. So Dave and Wally and I, or Don, Wally and I, or Dave and I would roll up Azusa Canyon and walk down to the off-road vehicle area and steal a rock. Not a rock, but a rock. About this big. And we dump it on people's front yards, right? Dave would paint little images on it and stuff like that. There was the Wally Stone, the Don Stone. So on Wally Stone, now Wally was a very portly guy. You've seen that. Dave painted a Tyrannosaurus Rex on the side of it, and a little caveman shooting a bow, and the dinosaur had arrows, little arrows sticking out of its nose, right? And we called it the Porcosaurus. Anyhow, he wrote the word over and an arrow pointing to the bottom of the rock. And we loaded it into the back of my car, and we drove to Wally's house and dumped it in his front yard, facing his front window. So Wally gets up in the morning, and his wife comes and says, "Your friend's dumped a big rock in the front yard." So Wally went out and looked at it, and he got a big laugh. And his wife goes out, and she starts wrestling with it. He goes, "What are you doing?" And she says, "Well, it says over on the bottom of the rock. I'm going to turn it over and see what it says." And Wally, in all his wisdom, looked at her and said, "There's nothing there. You're wasting your time." So after much struggling, because it took 3 of us to actually get this into my car and out of the car, she got it flipped over, and of course it was blank. And she was really angry because Wally was right. We're all at the bunker. We dug the hole, we placed Wally's ashes in it, and one of his family members, who will remain nameless, brought a bunch of white stones. And on one side we wrote our first name, and on the back side we wrote a little saying, and we placed them around Wally's ashes in their little sarcophagus. I placed the mug stone on top of that, and then we buried it. Then we had an honest-to-God 21-gun salute. We all said a few words. I said a poem by Frost. Wally liked it a lot. And it ends, "The forest path is dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep." And don't we all? So that night we had a toast to Wally. I brought shot glasses. We smashed them into the fire. We all sat around telling Wally stories. Well, it was a breezy, chilly night. And about 10 o'clock, everybody decided that we'd had enough excitement for the day. And more than half the group left. They were only staying there for the evening. So when everybody took off, there was my friend Kurt and I, a friend of mine named Corbin, and a friend of mine named Rich, Corbin's son, and his son's best friend. Because, let me tell you, Wally was a friend to everybody. Everybody loved him. Corbin's daughter and my niece. Now, my kids couldn't come because one lives on the other side of the country and the other was having a baby. So, I'll give them a pass. So we're all snuggled in. We let the fire burn because there was nothing to burn around there. I mean, it's very desolate. And we all hit the sack. About 3 hours later, I awake to talking, and I'm hearing Corbin and Rich out by the fire talking. I thought, what the hell? Couldn't they go to sleep? So I pass it off, and I fell back to sleep. So in the morning, Rich is making us all breakfast. We're having a big breakfast burritos, and my niece looks at Corbin and said, "What were you and Rich talking about last night?" And his daughter says, "Yeah, Dad, it was like 2 o'clock in the morning. You guys are out here jabberjawing." And Rich looks at Corbin and goes, "We weren't out here talking." And they looked at me, "Were you out?" And I said, "No, I was sound asleep. The talking woke me up too." And Devin, Corbin's son, and his best friend, they slept through it. They said, "We didn't hear anything." And I turned to everybody and I said, I guess Wally was catching up with Benny and Bob. You could have heard a pin drop. You could actually feel the air temperature drop when I said that. And my niece and Corbin's daughter looked at each other and said, "Sounds logical. After all, they haven't been able to talk to each other in 10 years. True story. Someone was out standing by the fire at 2 a.m. carrying on a conversation, as plain as day. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't a passing vehicle. If you're camped out there 3 days and see a car, that's rush hour. I get weird feelings just thinking about it. So, that's the story. And I hope you liked it. Tune in next time. I'll have another story. Could be about flying saucers. Could be about ghost lights in the mountain. Could be about the little running fireball. Or it could be about pranks we played on each other. Could have been about the time a buddy of mine and I drove off 110 foot. Who knows? I might even tell you what I did in the Army. Technically, it's not classified anymore, but I'll have to think about that. Thanks for joining me.